Hey everyone, welcome back. It looks like Major League Baseball has stuck their foot in it again. If you're into it, stay tuned after this. Okay, so it looks like that Major League Baseball has decided to move the All-Star Game, and it's cancel culture all over again, or so people say. Before we get started, if you like what I'm doing, please like this video, subscribe. Obviously, those are the normal things you have to do for every video, but want to jump right in. Basically, Major League Baseball has decided to move the All-Star Game from Atlanta, which is in Georgia, for those that don't know, and primarily over their new voting law that was just signed into law by the Governor Kemp of Georgia, basically in response to the election, or so they say. As we saw with the lawsuits from the Trump administration, there was no voter irregularities pretty much anywhere that was found. So basically this is a solution looking for a problem, but let's hear what they have to say.
There's also a debate happening outside the ballpark. It is over the Major League Baseball All-Star Game scheduled, as you know, in Cobb County for the summer. Opponents of Georgia's recent election law election reform are now pushing to move this contest. Last night, President Biden told ESPN that he supports taking the Midsummer Classic out of Atlanta, out of Georgia, applauding the leadership of professional athletes calling for a boycott. His comments raising the ire of Governor Kemp, who called the president's comments ridiculous.
So obviously on top of all this, this has become a political issue. The governor in his statements have called it cancel culture gone wild. They're coming after everybody's jobs. But this is a legitimate issue, and it's obviously impacts not only everyday people and how they exercise their right to vote, but also just elected officials and how they run in those countries, in those counties in Georgia. Now, election law can make it easier to vote or harder to vote, right? Most Republican states have generally make it harder to vote, where most Democratic states make it easier to vote. Me personally, I don't really think it should be a left or right, Republican or Democrat situation. We should make it as easy to vote as possible. And right now, the facts are we could submit our taxes, everything online. The reason why it's not online is beyond me at this point. But at least with the backup, making in-person and vote by mail easier should be the way to go. But a lot of Republican states have gone the other way. Their feeling being, which they have said in a lot of public statements, that the more people vote, the less likely they are to win, which really shouldn't be the case, right? If you notice that you're not winning because a lot of voters are not liking your policies, you shouldn't make it harder for people to vote. You should change your policies. That's really the way it's supposed to work anyway. So let's continue to listen.
Atlanta's mayor says this is only the beginning of the fallout.
People, not just across this state, but across this country, are extremely disappointed with the actions that have been taken. And people are contemplating what those consequences will be. And moving the All-Star Game, or even the discussion about moving the All-Star Game, is just one consequence, but there are going to be so many more.
So she's talking about not just having consequences for the people, but whenever elected officials take action, especially on an issue that doesn't make much sense to take action on, like this issue. Voter integrity and voter suppression is a real thing in this country, and we need vast reforms. But when you take action, you got to expect a repercussion. And I know the video kind of made it sound like she was against the All-Star Game leaving. Well, she would be against it because it's her state, right? You don't want things leaving your state. But she understands it because of the voting law, and people want to make it known that voting should be easy, not hard. So let's talk a little bit about what's in this Georgia voting law, why people are upset about it. So if it shrinks the window for early and absentee voting. Again, this is making it easier, right? You want absentee and early voting, make sure more people have opportunity to vote. A lot of people can't get to the voting booth on a Tuesday in the middle of the week, right? So early voting is to expand the window. Absentee voting is for people that aren't available or aren't in the state or aren't available for voting at all in person and would prefer to vote by mail, is basically what it is. So what they did was they shortened the period for when this can happen. For the absentee, they shortened it from 6 months where you could request a ballot to 3 months. This also impacts people on the ground who are out there trying to get people to get re-engaged in the process and start voting again. And a lot of times the first step people take into that process is to do absentee voting. So that shortens the amount of time people have to get those people re-engaged in the process is what we want. We want more people voting, more people participating in the vote. And then it basically shortens the early voting also. So, and then it says counties and the state could send mail ballot applications only to voters who requested them. So last year in 2020, they sent out the applications to every registered voter, right? Now, they thought a lot of this was blown up in the media from specifically Trump, but other Republicans, that these were sent out to every vote. The actual ballot was sent out to everybody. No, the application for a mail-in ballot was sent out to everybody. That's what should be happening is everybody in every state that's eligible should get the application so they know they're eligible, right? And they can make that informed choice themselves. They increased voter ID requirements. For voters who cast mail ballots will have to provide one of several forms of identification, which basically previously was just matching the signatures. Now they have to somehow provide an ID, which is also targets low income and minority voters because they're the ones that often don't have the IDs because they don't drive. They can't drive, they can't afford to drive. They're far away from areas where they can get the ID to begin with, and since they don't drive, they don't see it's necessary. So a lot of these ID laws, they're like, oh, it's to protect the vote. It's not. It's to restrict people that are poor, minority, white, brown, doesn't matter, from voting because it makes it harder for people to cast that vote. It limits the number of ballot drop-off boxes during early voting. Basically, again, drop-off boxes is somebody doesn't want to mail it, they want to physically just drop it off because they just want to be sure it gets there. Like that's how I did it when I did my mail-in voting last year in 2020 and just in our municipal elections that are happening this week. I actually physically took it to a drop box and they're limiting how many, so again, making it harder for people to vote. I don't know if in Georgia if they provide prepaid envelopes for mail-in voting, but I'm guessing they don't given some of these other things. And that's a way for helping low-income people vote by not assessing additional costs. Shorten early voting in runoff elections is similar. Runoff elections happen when you saw in this last election for the Senate, Georgia isn't just a plurality, whoever has the most votes win, you have to get over 50%. So runoff elections happen is if there's more than 2 candidates and the total winner has less than 50%, the top 2 do a runoff election where they go against just the top 2 to get to somebody over 50%. And then state lawmakers get much more power over county and local elections. Basically, this limits the authority of the local election officials of making special provisions. Then they have this is the thing that made the news most recently is the ban on handing out food and water within 150 feet of a polling location. So the reason this is important, as we've seen, because our voting systems are screwed up in many ways beyond this, is that there's long waiting lines when to go to vote. And these people can be in line for hours and hours and hours. And this is preventing people from providing food and water to the people that are waiting in line. It's strange. I have no idea why, why they would even include this. My main thought is why they would include this would be this is something that's so outrageous that it captures the mind of the media, and they forget to mention these other parts of the voting law, which hasn't worked so far. This water and food thing has taken off, but for the most part, the media has been good about including the other parts that are a problem. So it does have a couple good things. It does have make sure there's a minimum number of drop boxes. which is good because you want to make sure there's enough for everybody. Still, it's not enough widespread. And a lot of these expansions of voting are happening in rural counties. Again, this is a bill that's 100% politically motivated. This is not motivated by actual issues to address actual issues that they were having, which would have been to make it easier to vote, just generally. By targeting these expansions to rural counties, which both of these first two say, they're targeting their voters again. Republican voters, Kemp voters, who's the governor, tend to be rural voters. So by expanding these, yes, we should expand them, but it should be expanded everywhere. By targeting the rural counties, they clearly are marketed towards their constituents. So it puts a block on Sunday voting, which is a big thing for churchgoers. Churches organize this. Specifically, black churches organize Sunday voting. They call it Ride to the Polls or Souls to the Polls. So that's a targeted thing. There's a ban on no excuse absentee voting. I'm not going to go into some of the other things, but basically, from what we saw in this law, they can't be surprised that people are taking offense to making voting harder, right? Every effort in this country should be made to make voting easier, not harder, right? And by them targeting minorities, people of color, poor people, they make it clear that this is not about election security making things easier. By adding additional resources to rural voters, but taking them away from urban voters, they make it clear it's 100% political, has nothing to do with election security, has nothing to do with making voting easier. They want to make it harder for the people that they don't think will vote for them to vote and make it easier for the people that they do think will vote for them to vote. And that's not how this should work, right? Everybody should have equal, easy access to the ballot box. Ideally, everybody should have 100% ability to do their mail-in ballots. Hopefully at some point we move this to online in some form so it makes it even easier for people. But the goal should be always to move forward towards more and more people being easier for them to participate in this. The Democrats in Congress have passed H.R. 1, which is a voting bill designed to fix a lot of these things. Of course, there's opposition in the Senate from the Republicans. Hopefully we can get around that in some way, but it's not looking good right now. Ideally, again, we need to make voting easier, not harder, and this is pretty ridiculous. So hopefully you got a little bit more out of this and you gained a little bit more context around these ideas. If you did, please like this video below. And in the comments below, tell me what you think outside of the food and water thing is the most outrageous change to in this Georgia election bill. I'd love to hear what you have to say and get a better perspective. Maybe I'm missing something big here. But until the next time, I'll see you around the internet. You have a great night. Bye.